over this way a little bit, and I'll do my best and use my principal voice to make sure you can hear me as well. So a little bit about me. I've been in Stafford County now. This is my 28th year I'm beginning. Implant from Pittsburgh. And at that time, my wife and I came down. Interesting, my wife and I were hired in the same room. We were interviewed back. We were sitting next to each other. I've never had an interview like that before, where you sit in one room and one question's asked and the next person answers it and you go back and forth. Never done that before. That's what happened with my wife and I. But 28 years later, I'm a principal, and my wife's been an amazing educator. She's taught kindergarten, first, and second grade. I began my career at Hartwood Elementary School for my first 6.5 years. Then I was at Rocky Run for 3.5 years. And I've been at Moncure now. This is my 18th year. I tell people all the time, I can't believe, I don't know how it happened. I was the young guy in the room, and suddenly I'm the older principal that's out there, and it's just where we are. So I obviously never had a chance to meet Miss Moncure. She passed away in 1984. However, I have had a chance to meet Millie, who actually was an accountant for our PTO, which I think is really cool too. So that connection has always stayed there. This actually is a picture that's hanging right in front of our library of our building. And I just love how this slide captures it, and it captures who Miss Moncure is. I never, until I even did my recent research and went even further, never had ever seen the Miss Anne E. Eliza, being her, what E stands for, Stribling Moncure, that she has all those names that are in her whole name. And I found that really interesting. So a little bit about Annie. Before I get to Annie, I want to talk about her family. And I do also want to leave a precursor. So there were multiple Freelance Star articles that I've used. I've also used some books, both by Jane and Al, her husband, who I was able to pull some information from. So you know where my resources are coming from. So her father is Robert Ambler, born in Stafford in 1864. Her mom is Agnes Waller, was born also in Stafford in 1864 as well. They married in December 7th of 1887. And they had one son, and there were 5 daughters that made up their happy family. Mr. Moncure passed away much earlier in life at the age of 59 on October 12th of 1923. And Annie's mom was around and passed away on October 22nd of 1951. So definitely a big difference between the two. She was 87. All of her kids really lived a long life when you look to see the ages. And Annie kind of fell right in the middle of all the kids in her family. A little bit about Miss Moncure. So obviously born February 4th, 1895, and she was born with a dislocated hip. But at that time, there were no known surgeries to fix the dislocated hips. So that later led to 2 different things for her. First of all, it led to a challenge that she would walk. Although she never let that ever interfere with her, never considered herself disabled, her personality, her ambition kind of overtook all of those areas for her. But she was under 5 feet tall, and that's a big reason why they believe she was, is because of those hips when she was born. She passed away on October 18th, 1984. But there is a picture that I pulled up here that I really love to see as well. This came from Al's book. It's really interesting to see. This is Miss Moncure right here. And she was really big. Her entire life was really involved with a quiet church. So there's one of her pictures from one of her rectory groups where she was there. So really interesting to see that. Wrote down a home for a lifetime, because this is where Annie lived from the time she was a little girl up until she passed away. And the home actually was located right where the current Jay's Sports Grill is. It used to be Shoney's. Those of us think back further, but that's where it used to be located. Obviously, Miss Moncure passed away in 1984, but in 1987, a portion of the house was moved to a quiet church where it is called the Flurries. And the Flurries nickname was because Miss Moncure loved her garden. She loved her flowers. And so that actually was named. And there's an awesome moniker that's there on a quiet church property to show that connection to the property. But they moved part of it from the house whenever they were tearing it down onto the church property. So a quiet church is the oldest active church in Stafford County, but during the wars that took place in their area, it actually had kind of disbanded a little bit. And they kind of had to work on building it back. And so whenever it was a rebirth of the church, interesting fact, her relative John Moncure is known as the first pastor then at that point of a quiet church. Now it's interesting because that's long after when he was the first pastor from the 1667, whenever the church was established. Found that to be really interesting information. So now we tie into Miss Moncure. And so she attended, which was known at the time as the Teachers College of Fredericksburg. That school has changed its name multiple times. Current name, obviously, is Mary Washington University. I almost made the mistake writing this and left Mary Washington College even on there because that was, of course, the last shift that took place. Now, as she was doing this, it appeared when I went back into the research, and actually I'm upset I left that date off there. She actually graduated from Mary Washington University in the 1920s. Which I found interesting because I had to do a couple double takes because in 1917 is when she was recorded as teaching first graders in Alexandria. And as she put it, the 125 kids, the two groups of 65 kids, I could not imagine what that would look like to do that. But I really found it interesting that she was teaching first grade before she had even finished her degree. I thought that was really, really, interesting. But that's a sign of the times when you really look back into it. So after she had taught in Alexandria for a while, she moved over to Marine Base at Quantico, where she taught kindergarten and primary grades. And then from there, she came back to Stafford County, where she taught at Stafford Elementary. Not the same as Stafford Elementary. I believe it's a couple schools back for where she was. And she refers to, later on, whenever the first Annie Moncure Elementary School was built, she talked about how that school was too grand and how really it was a far cry from the 1- and 2-room schoolhouse that she had taught in. So it's really interesting how those times have changed to go along with it. She was there for 3 years at Stafford Elementary. And in 1934, that's whenever she accepted this position as superintendent of elementary education, and where she held that position until 1960. Obviously had worked really, really hard in the education world. So there are a couple ways that she became very, very famous. This was definitely one of her biggest areas. And this was this mobile library. So she brought the libraries to Stafford when there were none. And she truly created the idea of the first bookmobile, you can say, because she would load up her car, her station wagon, and then she'd drive it to the different schools in the county where the kids would be able to take the books out and check those out. So truly, again, exchange those books. And I found it interesting. I have this family friend, Miss Evie, listed a couple times, and she said, the library was certainly an incredible thing at the time. Many families couldn't afford books or magazines. She had this massive station wagon that she drove around with the books that children could borrow. And so I love to read that from her family friend. I'll tie back into that in a bit. So then we get into how she taught. And I will tell you, I really, really played around with a little bit about which pictures to put up here because I like to capture those. But you may see a toilet, and you'll understand why here in a second. But there's a funny story that goes along with that. So she was really intrigued to teach history and make it come alive for her learners. And one of her favorite ways to do that was through the old Sears catalog. And she believed that she should be able to teach kids how to do math, how to order, and how to learn from that. And truly, and she said how to use indoor plumbing was another one of her big pieces. Well, why that was important to her was while she was teaching is whenever indoor plumbing was introduced to schools. And while we all deal with different situations now when a child is like, well, where are they right now? Back in her time in school, it's when she would find, hey, if somebody was missing, they were most likely flushing the toilet inside because it was a new thing. And I found that kind of funny. So I had to include that up here for her. So Miss Evie's up here again, and she had another great take up here. I won't take her exact quote right now, but she talked about, since there were limited schools in Stafford County, many of her students went on to higher prestigious positions in the county. And so she would do this delicate walk between what a student actually maybe said or how mischievous they may have been when they were in her classroom, but never give their name for who they were. So she was known for telling stories about her students. She just never gave away who they were. And so I found that to be very interesting as well. Well, in the end of the day, Miss Moncure had a big heart. And so she was known for caring about her students, believing in them, encouraging them, and helping them to be successful adults. And multiple articles, it comes out and says, this is what she was about. Another big part was it wasn't just a library that she was bringing around. She was making sure she was providing shoes or toys, taking people to the doctor's office. She was the complete package to help out people and look out for her students and the community. So then along comes a school and her name. So in 1966 is when the first Moncure Elementary School was opened. And it was a 20-room classroom, or 20 classroom building at that time. It was just the front section, if you drive by still on 610. And it was added on to 2 additional times as it went along. But I find it really interesting when she was interviewed by the Freelance Star, and she said, it's very grand, it's wonderful. And then she followed up by saying, but I don't think I would be very much at home there. And I think that's just an amazing quote by her, because she just liked that 1 to 2 room schoolhouse feel the most. And I really was struggling to find this, and I know I read it somewhere, but I didn't want to put it in here. So obviously that school opened up with air conditioning and carpeting, which she was wowed by the fact that the school had carpeting inside of it. But there is a couple years back, I came across an article and I could not find it, but there was something I found. It was saying along the lines that it was one of the first air-conditioned schools in Virginia. And I can't find it. I can't be quoted on it, but I read it a couple years ago, and I really found that to be interesting. So I feel pretty strong. Now, the cost of building these buildings have changed a lot. And so I really, I was intrigued when I dug this information up. The original Moncure Elementary School was built for $580,000, and a little over that. But really, think about that. And again, it was added on to 2 additional times to add another 13 classrooms on it. So that's a pretty interesting fact about the building. So this is the building I can speak to a lot. The transition I was a part. I spent in the old Moncure, I guess that would have been, this is our 6th year we're opening up right now, so 12 years in the old building. And I was very much a part of the process of us transitioning to the new Moncure. So here we are, 2019, and a Moncure rebuild is established in her name. And you'll see it in here in a second. I make a little bit of fun with this. So 53 years the other building was in service for our county before it was replaced. And really, there were so many meetings that took place as we developed this new school, and it went back to Miss Moncure left and right. And her love for kids, her library, and her love for books was really at the core of everything we thought of as we were trying to design the building. I think you'll see that here in a second. So when the new Moncure opened up with 51 classrooms and spread over 3 floors. So that was definitely a big surprise. Interesting, we're adding another 4 cottage classrooms onto the building as of this summer. So we'll be at 55 classrooms as of this year, not totally attached. But obviously over those 53 years, the price of building these buildings along with the size has changed a lot because it came in just under $29 million. Kind of crazy how that inflation has gone. So I talked about that library. And when you come into Moncure Elementary today, the library is that centerpiece. The school was built with two pods or two sections on either side, and the library is right in the middle of it. And again, we wanted to make sure that the books were the foundation of all learning, and the architects definitely made sure that happened. I use this word, the new Moncure is grand too, because Miss Moncure said that about the last school, saying it's grand, and I don't know if I could teach there. I could not pass up that grand word as I was pulling this together. But obviously, as you can see, the library, you have a large circulation. There is a STEM or a maker space that's integrated right above the library. And it's just a great spot that is an energy that goes into it, that location inside the building. Some people will say, wow, why is there a spiral staircase right there? Well, I'm going to blame that on the architect, but I will tell you that it has also led to many moving on ceremonies now inside the building, and there is a reason for it. The library was designed as the school is facing. If you can imagine these great big windows in the back and going straight down, that heads to Smith Lake. So the architect's thinking in the building was water flow, and if you were to look at the water on the ground, or the blue on the ground, it's meant to look like a stream, and saying that actually it's where Moncure is sitting that is feeding the stream that then feeds Smith Lake. So that's the thinking behind how that was put together. So it's kind of neat when you know that. Obviously, the classrooms are a lot different. This gives you an idea. I actually was really sad with myself because you would think all these times I've taken pictures, but I had a lot of kids in the way and I couldn't use all those right now. So I had to do my best. So this gives you a really good idea of how these classrooms look without furniture as they are cleaning them as of right now, and what some of the spots look like as well. But this one really shows it really well because the school was designed to be able to write even on all four surfaces with dry erase markers. The kids can be up and moving around inside, and that's a really, really great thing to be able to get kids out of their seats and move. They're sitting around enough right now when they get home, so the more we can move them around, the better. So in the middle of these sections where everyone learns, we call them our pods. And so each of our pods then would have anywhere between 7 and 8 classrooms around the outside of them. And then these middle sections are used for kids for extra support in math or reading. Or Moncure has a large number of ESOL students who are at our school. So to be able to help them out with their language acquisition. So again, Miss Moncure was out teaching people in different ways and connecting with them. And I would say this school definitely reaches that area of being outside the box and thinking to support our kids. Moncure is the only elementary school to have a full-size gym inside of it. And that is because our Parks and Recs, when we designed the building, said we would love to have a location for people to play volleyball, people to play basketball for Parks and Recs. And so they were a great partner with us, and they're always inside of our building. But we benefited out of it too, because now we have a great sized gym that we can pull a whole school together. Our school currently has just under 900 kids inside of it. I mentioned a couple of the spaces before, but it gives you an idea of our art room and everything, all the pictures. You see all the windows and the light, our society right now, we're so hyper focused on the bad. But as we designed the building, it was focused on visibility. And so with visibility comes less of other incidents that take place commonly in halls behind solid brick walls or whatever else. And it also causes this extra light. And it's an energy and it's an excitement that goes along with that. So you can see where our art room is, and it has that industrial feel to it. And our music room that's here. And I mentioned our makerspace before, where kids can design things out of STEM projects. Just a lot of great learning aspects and learning space. So then we go back into a couple of these murals that are inside of the building. So we mentioned before, we unveiled our mural here just a couple months ago in paying tribute to a few of our past. And this is our first of many that we plan to have inside of our building. And super excited about it to be there. It was actually drawn and created by our art teacher, and she did a fantastic job, bringing a lot of detail. And to go along with that, right outside of our office, which I don't know of any other school that has this right now. It's you can't miss it without coming to our school without learning about Miss Moncure. And this is one of my favorite aspects of the building, because just like I talked about, when the new school opened up and how many kids Miss Moncure taught, or where she lived or her library, a lot of things I've shown you is right there. And you can't come to our school without learning about Miss Moncure, which I love. So they were our first, but obviously we have lots of space to go ahead and continue that aspect of the building. So put this caption up here, like Miss Moncure, a school also with her name as a winner. And that school actually came through and has received multiple different recognitions from architects and engineers and designers, which is kind of cool. It is the most energy efficient building in our county school that we have. And again, between design and interiors, has done very well as well for itself, but all in her name. And I think that's a really important piece to say. I will tell you, I'm always correcting people. And my biggest thing I would correct a lot of people for is it's easy to see people say, hey, it's Moncure Elementary School. And I'm always correcting people to say it's not Moncure Elementary School, it's Annie Moncure Elementary School. There's a name behind it. And it is one of those things that I've always kind of been a stickler for, of trying to make sure that people understand that it's not, there's a reason why the school has a name. So that's what I have to share about Ms. Moncure here for this evening. And I may not have answers to every question you have, but there may be individuals inside this room that have some answers for some that you may have from Ms. Moncure. And any questions or thoughts?
Greg, you were talking about Gerald and Evie McGregor.
Yes.
She's here.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I didn't realize we didn't introduce you.
No, you did not. Well, how awesome is that? Well, thank you for providing.
She's an awesome resource.
Yes, absolutely.
And a pretty cool person, too.
Absolutely. No, here I was talking to you all along. I would have called you out already, so thank you. Yes, sir.
You had several people in the mural. Could you go back to that and tell us who the various people were?
Oops. Yes, I can. Chief Powelton is there. George Washington, Pocahontas, and Thomas Jefferson. And all very important individuals for Virginia's past and our United States history.
And I had the honor of having a tour by Greg. I don't know how many years I've known you, Greg, but when I had the tour, he knew every child's name in that school. I mean, they love him and he loves them too. But there's such an energy and a love for learning that you just feel when you go there and have in that building. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, we were there on just a random morning, and classes were in session, children were in the library, they were busy being there all the way through the building. Yeah. And you're right, it was just the perfect atmosphere.
Thank you. Well, again, that's one of the things we take pride in doing. We want our kids to want to be in school, right? And we want to make learning engaging. I almost made a mistake and said fun, because it's engaging is the key word that we need to have for our kids.
You can have fun when you're engaged.
Yes, exactly. But engaging, I think, is number one.
Right.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned, Annie, how short she was. She had a great big green Chevrolet car that she drove. And if you saw a car coming, it looked like nobody was in it. It was Annie. She would look through the steering wheel. She could see through the steering wheel. I mean, it looked like nobody was driving.
Oh.
And she she walked with a cane, and she would go out to the car, and she'd put her cane up on the car and be doing stuff, and she'd forget. She lost lots of canes that way. Drive off and forget her cane.
Oh.
She was a neat lady.
No, anything I've found, anything I read and heard about her was pretty interesting. She sounded really
Somebody
great.
broke into her house and stole some stuff, and she caught them. She was living there, and she caught them. She said, "What are you doing in my house?" And she said, "What do you think we're doing?" And they took off and slammed the door, but she confronted them. She wasn't afraid of them. She confronted them. But they stole some of her old silver and stuff.
Her dad was pretty much the organizer of Stafford County's first telephone company.
Oh wow.
The Toluca and Fredericksburg Telephone Company. And his nickname was Cappy. And so Cappy ran that. Annie helped him, but when she was teaching up in Alexandria, of course, she was living in Alexandria, and so couldn't do much with it. But when he died in 1923, that was what brought her back to Stafford, and she continued teaching and being secretary and basically running the telephone company.
Oh wow.
She had a board of directors also, but Cappy was the one that did that, and I don't remember the year. I think it was probably around 1950 or so that they sold out to a bigger company, and that was the end of Toluca and Fredericksburg.
Wow. Yes, sir.
Maybe I missed it. Didn't see anything about her being married or any children.
She was not. She was never married. No children. Exactly.
And I always love the story, Gerald, and perhaps you could make more of it than but I remember hearing that she loved to polish the silver at a quiet church, and she kept it, the pieces for communion, she put in a clothes basket and would take to her home and put clothes all around the silver so no one would steal the
It was
silver.
actually a pasteboard box.
Pardon?
It was actually a pasteboard box.
Oh,
And her mother, the silver communion service for a quiet church dated like 1730s,
Oh, wow.
40s, somewhere in there. And her mother kept the silver, and every communion Sunday would bring it from the house that you have a
Mhm.
picture of and set it up there at church. And then after Agnes died, her mother, then Annie took that over, and she just had it in a ratty old pasteboard box. And in the back part of the house, there was a stairway that went upstairs that they didn't use. It had a bunch of boxes and trash and everything, and she just shove it up in there, and nobody had a clue that there was priceless 18th century silver there. But she would bring it out every communion Sunday and haul it over to a quiet church.
Wow.
Now it's in a vault.
Okay. I bet.
So I noticed that it looks like her parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, it keeps going back multiple generations are buried there in a quiet church.
From what I could tell, yes.
It's amazing. I don't know if they have headstones, but I'm wondering, does she have any close siblings that are also buried or still live in this area?
She had cousins, yes, there are still some Moncures. There are several lines of Moncures, but they're all the same bunch. They're kind of dispersed now. One's down Colonial Beach, one's up in Northern Virginia. So yeah, there are a few, but not on any property that they own.
And I found a big connection. I couldn't find enough to dig in, but the Belmont estate, I found that there's a connection to the Moncures to the Belmont estate. And I'm not sure if anybody you can speak to that, because when I looked it up, it showed the Moncure. It kept going that direction first and saying that her ancestors were also involved with that property.
You talking about Montpelier?
No, Belmont down off of 17.
I'm not familiar with,
And again, I didn't put it in here, but I would tell you multiple times when I looked it up, it talked about that family were involved with that property.
the Moncures intermarried with most of the other relatively prominent families in this area. So I wonder, I'm not aware of a Moncure that was involved with Belmont. I know that one of her cousins owned Montpelier
Okay.
for a while. Bought it after, when Dolly Madison had to sell it for debt. But I'm not familiar with the Moncure being involved. That's fascinating. We'll have to see.
And I
we
missed
can
to
find that.
click past one here as well, but obviously one other big factor was that her aunt was Miss Kate Waller Barrett, which is also a really interesting fact. I'm not sure how I managed to go through that because I know I've included it, but I found that to be a really, really awesome piece. I mean, imagine being one family having two schools itself because of the impact you made off of two family members. So that's pretty amazing.
But the fishing industry with scribblings and all,
Right, so Annie's mother was Anna Liza Stribling from Fauquier County, married Withers Waller of Stafford. And they lived up in Whitewater, so they had 8 daughters who lived to adulthood. One of them was Agnes, who was Annie's mother. One of them was Kate Waller Barrett. And then there was a variety, I think they all married but one. So, and you know, the fishing industry was a major operation, but that was where the Anna Liza Stribling Moncure came from.
Just piggyback on that real quickly. I was just at, there's a cemetery behind Chicken Loop, and there's a lot of walrus.
Same family.
Same family. That's
Mhm.
awesome. That's kind of Tom Waller. Wow.
There were lots of little wallers.
I also found there was it just said a grandparent, but I think it was great, right? That had said that one of her, again, a grandmother of hers, I don't know which level, had been proposed to by George Washington. And that her grandmother had said, sorry, you are too poor, and declined. So I can't find anything where it goes back to what level or what, great or whatever that would be. But I thought that was a really fascinating story as well, and I found that a couple different
did you
times.
ever hear that, Carolyn?
Yeah, and Annie's parents had her portrait on the living room wall in there, and I'm pretty sure it was Mary Carey Ambler. So Robert Ambler Moncure is where that is coming from. And the family went up to visit, they drove up to Washington. I do not know what year, but the White House was open, and so they went up and they were gonna go through the White House. And when they came back, Mary Carey Ambler had fallen off the wall, and there was a ladder back type chair there that had little pieces that went up, and one of the pieces on the back of the chair went right through Mary Carey's heart. So they said she was brokenhearted over not having matched up with George Washington.
The thing about the flurries you mentioned, I'm not sure where the story came from, but the flowers, but there was a family by the name of Flurries that built that house. And that was an older name.
Okay.
So, yeah,
Henry
thank you.
Fleury, various spellings, and we're going back to like 1804-ish. Fleury is how it often appears in the early records. Henry never owned it. Henry only rented it, which is fascinating because it became known as the Flurries, and basically places like that were used as landmarks. So if someone was giving you directions for how to go to Fredericksburg or how to go out to Fauquier County or whatever, they would say, well, you go past the Flurries and you do such meaning Mr. Fleury's house.
Got it.
So it was always spelled Fleury''S. In later years, probably in the 1940s, Annie set up a greenhouse. She bought a glass greenhouse and had it delivered in pieces. There was a man named Earl Shepherd who moved in there and lived there and helped her with that. So they had a greenhouse and a nursery, and we have an envelope from that that says LaFleur Nursery. So they were playing on that Fleury.
So that's probably a connection of where I had read it and
Yes.
hadn't.
That's where they got that.
So the greenhouse was still standing when I was fair,
Oh, yeah,
well,
it's-
I mean,
it was up
until the development, and they destroyed the whole place.
in the 80s or something.
Yeah, I
So-
mean, I came in here in 1978 and the greenhouse was still,
Yeah.
It was near the
It
road,
stayed
near
there,
Route
it
One.
stayed there
Yeah.
until they took everything out. The, little building that they did move, the part that they did move, George Gordon insisted that he wanted to lay brick on the top of that building, and he did lay some of that brick, on the top of that chimney on that, at the White Church. The George Gordon that this building's named after, he and I put the brick on top of that chimney on the lower building. I didn't want to, but he insisted that we had to, and so we did the brick on that, and I'm not a bricklayer, so. But he and I did that, and I was amazed that he didn't kill himself going up down the scaffolding, because he was pretty old then, you know.
You did the veneer work on the foundation, didn't you?
Stone, yeah.
You come here to teach us.
And I learned.
We're always students.
I love it.
Always students.
Love it.
It's
You're
very
still
good
here?
to rehash.
Oh, it is.
Thank
Very good to hear this.
This
Thank
is
you.
such fun,
Yeah.
because she was such a big part of my life
In this county,
and this
and
county.
King George too.
When she became, superintendent of elementary education, the school districts of Stafford and King George were together.
Oh,
So she was superintendent of elementary ed for both counties
got it.
for many years. So she took her station wagon and her bookmobile all down through King George and through Stafford as well.
It's the first I've heard that also. That's really interesting.
Nice. This is great.
thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Greg.